Hello and welcome to your Java programming course, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create a for loop. Now in the last video we created a while loop. We learned how to create a count variable and how to add 1 to it using count++. We learned how to create a variable clause which allowed us to create a working loop. Well, a for loop combines all three. A for loop creates the variable, it gives us the clause, and it includes the count++, as in the adder. So I'm going to show you how a for loop looks. Type in for, open up your clause brackets, and inside we create the variable. So let's say int I. I is the general term we use for a count variable in a for loop, and we say int I equals 0. We now create the clause. So, kind of like a while loop, while I is not equal to 10. And then we close with a semicolon again, and in this third part we add a counter, which is the r++. We've now created a for loop. We add on our brackets, and voila, the for loop has been created. The same result can be done, so we print I. When we run the for loop, it prints just as intended. Both the while and the for loop are great options for when creating your own loops. It is up to you to decide which one you prefer best. Personally, I believe the for loop is a better choice. It does seem a bit more complicated, but it does shorten your code length. You'll notice that I don't have several lines of code creating the r variable. Instead, I incorporate them all into one line. Now in the rest of the video, I'm going to show you what a complex loop looks like. A complex loop, or a nested loop, is basically a loop within a loop. So it would look something like this. This is a complex loop. You will notice that it will run as many times as the outer loop does. So if the loop here counts up the r, it increases the amount of times the for loop is run. We often use this to create patterns. For example, we'll create a system.out.print, and let's say we print a star. Not a print line, but a print. And then after the for loop, we'll create a new line like this. So when we run the loop, it'll look something like this. You notice we have created a pattern of stars. A complex loop is when an interior loop runs longer and longer as the main loop continues. So as you can see, the for loop runs once, and so does this, runs once. But when this runs loop again, the interior loop runs a second time, because you notice that this is a variable, not a static number. Instead, the variable increases in size while a static number does not. As the r++ increases the r value, it increases the amount of times the interior for loop will run, hence the pattern below. Bear in mind that this is the most complex of complex loops. For example, the second for loop does not have to include a variable. It can include another static number. What this will do is just run the same pattern over and over again. Now that I have shown you both loops, I'm going to show you what an infinite loop looks like. An infinite loop is a loop that has no end. For example, let me create a temporary number of 5. So I type in now a while loop, while I is not equal to 10. And I open up the brackets, and my output, let's just say it'll be loop. Now you notice I haven't had a counter added here, so this loop will continue to run because I will not change from 5 to 10, so the loop will never end. So as you can see, loop has been printed over and over and over again, and it will continue to do so until we stop the program by pressing the red square on the side here. This is how we cancel programs that do not seem to be working correctly, and this often is the case when working with infinite loops. The same can be done with the for loop. for int I equals 1 while I is not equal to 0, I plus plus. Now, as you have already noticed, the number that I've selected to end the loop is unreachable unless I use minus minus, but in this case it will continue to add numbers and I'll get no closer to 0. So, just like the while loop before, and once again, the only way to stop it is by pressing the stop button on the side. I recommend you practice your for and while loops, and once you've built enough experience of them, have a go at trying complex loops. They may seem difficult at first, but once you start creating patterns that you can recognize, a for loop and a while loop will become as easy as a system out print. In the next video, we'll move on to inputting values through an input box.